It was a picture-perfect afternoon. Kids running barefoot on freshly mown grass, burgers sizzling on the grill, neighbors chatting over cold drinks, patriotism on display, a small-town celebration of family and togetherness. At the center stood David Reynolds, a proud father standing tall in a crisp polo, holding a drink in one hand, his gaze fixed on his son, Jason, down on one knee. Jason's voice cracked only slightly, but she said yes, hands shaking, laughter all around, tears in every eye. A perfect moment. Yet less than 72 hours later, everything changed. In that same backyard, under those flags, David raised his arm and emptied 9 bullets into his future daughter-in-law's chest. Why did a father, loving and protective, cross the line into murder? What secret did the bride-to-be carry? What shattered David's world, turning joy into tragedy? This isn't just a story of a proposal gone wrong. It's a story about family, trust, and the lengths one man will go when his beliefs are broken. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. David Reynolds was 58 years old, a retired Marine Corps sergeant, proud homeowner, and deeply respected in his community. His identity had been built on discipline, control, and sacrifice. The uniform may have come off, but the code he lived by never changed. His son, Jason Reynolds, was 26. A quiet, thoughtful man with a promising career in software and a soft spot for the people he loved. To his father, Jason was a legacy, a chance to pass on a lifetime of values to the next generation. They didn't always agree, but they understood each other, or at least that's what David believed. Then came Camille Hart, 29, born in Atlanta, charismatic, career-driven, magnetic in the way she spoke and moved. Jason met her at a tech conference in Charlotte. Within months, she left her condo in Midtown to move into Jason's place back in his Georgia hometown. At first, David welcomed her. She was polished, articulate, and made an effort. She laughed at his stories, asked about his service, even called him sir. But over time, the charm started to wear thin. Not for Jason, for David. It was small things at first. A comment she made at dinner about marriage not being necessary. A phone call taken in hushed tones. A vague story about her previous job that didn't add up when David did his own digging. Jason brushed it all off, said she was just private. But David saw something else, or thought he did. So who was Camille Hart before she met Jason Reynolds? Why was there no record of her in her supposed hometown before 2021? No digital footprint, no family photos, no high school mentions. What exactly was she trying to hide? And then came the moment that changed everything. A Friday night. David stopped by to drop off tools. Jason wasn't home. Camille was. What happened inside that house remains a mystery. But David walked out with a blank stare and never mentioned a word of it to anyone. 3 days later, they gathered in the backyard. Jason proposed. Everyone clapped. David smiled. And less than 72 hours after that, Camille was gone. 9 bullets in her chest. Fired by the man who called her family. Was it premeditated? Or was David pushed into a moment he couldn't pull himself back from? David Reynolds was a man forged by structure. A traditionalist by nature, his values were anchored in discipline and a deep sense of duty. Values that came from his years in uniform. When his wife passed away, life forced a new chapter. He became both mother and father to Jason, pouring every drop of his heart into raising a boy on his own. He taught him right from wrong, strength from vulnerability, independence from defiance. Jason and David shared more than blood. They shared an unbreakable bond. From the sound of crackling leather in Little League practices, to caps flying at high school graduations, from late-night talks about college to the day they stood shoulder to shoulder on a shooting range, David teaching his son precision and purpose. Their relationship was simple in its perfection. Father and son, each a piece of the other. Then came Camille Hart. She entered their world softly, like an unexpected guest at dinner. Jason met her at a tech conference in Charlotte. They connected effortlessly. She was gentle yet ambitious, elegant in conversation, and quick with a smile. Jason was captivated. Within weeks, she moved in, weaving herself into their routines, their holidays, their quiet evenings at home. Friends described Camille as warm and caring, always asking about David's health, about how Jason was doing. She offered to help with dinner, helped decorate the house. In photos, they looked happy, 3 people making up a family. But amid the snapshots and laughter, there were moments of tension. At the kitchen table, David would watch Camille with a thoughtful look, a crease at his brow. He would say things like, "She's nice, but there's something about her I can't explain." And that voice of pride, suspicion, concern would linger in the room long after. Old photos become significant. The coach's pride in David's eyes, the quiet joy in Jason's posture. Social media posts of Camille in New York or Atlanta, a life outside their sleepy Georgia town. Casual interviews with friends paint her as kind and driven, but none have known her longer than a year. And in home videos, you can feel the friction in subtle glances. The smiles are present, but so are the stares. David watching Camille adjust Jason's tie, Camille laughing too long at a joke David didn't make. Because beneath the surface of this small-town idyll, under perfect summers and family dinners, a question grew. Could this outsider truly belong here? Or did her ambition, her past, carry too much weight to stay hidden forever? As we unpack their world, we begin to understand where devotion ends and doubt begins, and how a father's unspoken fears can set the stage for a moment that changes everything. The day of the backyard BBQ engagement party arrives. Family, friends, laughter, a celebration under an open sky. David Reynolds stands in the sun, smiling, drink in hand. Jason and Camille are at the center, radiant in their love. But beneath the surface, tension coils. A longtime family friend leans toward David, voice low and urgent. "You didn't hear it from me, but that girl used to be a guy." That whisper changes everything, and David starts digging. That night at home, David opens Camille's name online. He stumbles down a rabbit hole, old Reddit posts hinting at Camille's life before Atlanta. Blurry yearbook photos reveal a different face. Several users discuss legal name changes. One writes, "I was honest and said it's because I'm trans." By morning, David finds court documents, official name change filings. The name Andrew Thomas stares back. The connections are undeniable. The next day, he confronts Jason when he returns from work. Voices rise in the Reynolds living room. Accusations fly. "You lied to my son. You lied to all of us." Camille tries to calm him. Jason pleads for peace. But David's face is set. His voice trembles with disbelief and betrayal. That evening outside Camille's condo, the confrontation continues. Words escalate. Then, 9 shots. Neighbors hear the thunder. 911 calls begin. Camille falls, but she's not dead yet. On the pavement, bleeding, she whispers something to David, something so shocking it shifts the entire narrative. The doctor's report later confirms she was alive when first responders arrived. That whispered phrase becomes the turning point. And suddenly the case is not just a murder, it's a question of intention, of identity, and of truth. This wasn't a moment of blind rage. Something was unfolding in David's mind long before that final confrontation. But what exactly did Camille whisper in her last moments? And how would that change everything we thought we knew? Police arrived at the scene within minutes. Neighbors were already crowding near the yellow tape, staring in stunned silence at the woman bleeding out on the pavement. David Reynolds stood a few feet away, his hands raised, his voice calm as he addressed the first officer on scene. "I'm not running," he said. "I did what any father would have done." There was no struggle, no resistance. The gun was on the ground. The look on David's face was not panic, it was conviction. News broke within the hour. Transgender fiancé shot by future father-in-law. By morning, it was everywhere. Cable networks, talk radio, Twitter threads. The country divided itself almost instantly between those calling David a murderer and those labeling him a father protecting his son. between trans advocates who called it a hate crime and conservative voices who called it a failure of honesty. The town of Wren, Georgia, once barely a blip on any map, was now in a national spotlight. Camera crews parked outside the Reynolds house. Online forums flared with speculation. Camille's name trended for 2 days straight. The investigation moved quickly. Camille Hart had legally transitioned 5 years earlier. Her medical records were sealed. Her new identity was legally recognized in the state of Georgia. She had built a life of her own from that point forward, one she never hid from those she trusted. And Evan Reynolds? He knew, from early on. According to text messages recovered from his phone, Camille had told him just 3 weeks after they began dating. He had asked for time to process, and ultimately said it didn't matter. He loved her. That was enough. But he never told his father. In the interview room, detectives asked David whether this was about gender, about identity, about hate. His response was blunt. "It's not about hate," he said. "It's about deception. My son deserved the truth." And she took that from him. Later, investigators would replay that line over and over, because the evidence showed there was no immediate threat, no violence, no manipulation, only silence. A silence Evan had chosen, not Camille. Interviews with Camille's friends, reenacted from official statements, painted her as sincere and transparent. "She told Evan. She gave him the choice," said one close friend. That's honesty. Others in the community were less sympathetic. "She should have said something to the family," a neighbor claimed. "It's not just about the couple. It's about trust." As the district attorney built their case, the question became clearer. Was this an act of violence fueled by personal betrayal, or a calculated hate crime masked as moral outrage? The trial of David Reynolds began on a crisp Monday morning. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. Protesters stood shoulder to shoulder, some holding photos of Camille Hart, others waving signs reading, "He did what any father would." Inside, the mood was cold, controlled, but every seat was filled. The defense opened with a simple claim: temporary insanity. They framed David as a man unprepared for the world his son had chosen, a man raised on a strict moral code, blindsided by what they called a betrayal of trust. They spoke of cultural trauma, a lifetime of values unraveling in seconds, and then rage, blinding, uncontrollable rage. But the prosecution had a different story. To them, this wasn't a man broken by the moment. This was cold-blooded murder. They walked the jury through timelines, browser histories, and digital footprints. And then came the twist. During the investigation, forensic techs had uncovered something David never thought anyone would find. An old laptop Camille had used before moving in with Jason. David had accessed it 5 days before the shooting. His fingerprints were on it. So was his search history. He had read blogs, Reddit threads, medical journals. He spent hours poring over details of transgender medical procedures. One article had been opened 3 separate times. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was planned. He had gathered information. He had stewed in it. He had made a choice. What the defense called a father's emotional breaking point, the prosecution now framed as premeditation. Then came the emotional testimonies. Camille's sister took the stand, clutching a necklace her sister had given her just a month before the engagement. She could barely speak. She finally felt safe, she whispered, voice shaking. She finally thought she had a future. And then, Jason. He had avoided the media, refused interviews. But on the 3rd day of trial, he sat in the witness box and faced his father. "You didn't protect me," he said, his voice steady. "You destroyed me." His words didn't shake. His eyes didn't blink. The room was silent as the air seemed to thicken. After 5 days of testimony, arguments, and jury deliberation, the verdict came. David Reynolds was found guilty of second-degree murder. The judge called it a tragedy, not just for one family, but for everyone watching. As the gavel struck and the room exhaled, there was no victory, Only silence. Because this wasn't just about law. It was about love, fear, identity, and what happens when someone chooses to punish a truth they can't accept. In the days following the verdict, as news vans cleared out and protest signs were left crumpled on the courthouse lawn, one question still hung heavy in the air. What had Camille whispered before she lost consciousness? Police records confirmed it. Paramedics heard it. It was soft, barely audible. He knew. Your son knew. With those 4 words, everything shifted. David Reynolds believed he had been lied to, tricked. But in that final moment, Camille revealed the deeper betrayal. It hadn't come from her. It had come from Jason. Jason knew, from almost the beginning. And he'd chosen to live with it, quietly, without ever bringing that truth into the harsh light of his father's judgment. Camille hadn't deceived anyone. Jason had simply protected what he loved in silence because he understood what David wouldn't. The tragedy wasn't just in the gunshots or the trial. It was in a father unable to accept his son's independence, in a son who couldn't confront the man who raised him, in a woman who trusted both and paid with her life. After the trial, Jason disappeared from public view. Friends said he stopped answering texts. He left his job. Depression followed him like a shadow. He never returned to the condo he once shared with Camille, and for a long time, he blamed himself more than anyone else. Camille Hart's funeral was held 2 weeks after the verdict. Hundreds attended, some traveled from out of state. Photos of Camille lined the chapel, laughing, reading, dancing barefoot at a beach in Savannah. Her sister spoke last. She didn't die because she kept a secret. She died because telling the truth isn't always enough. The service became a turning point. In towns like Rennes, conversations changed. LGBTQ advocates began holding workshops in schools, churches, and community centers. Camille's story, once reduced to a headline, became something else. A call to question the roles we cling to and the boxes we use to measure worth. Because what really defines a man? Is it strength? Is it control? Is it the ability to silence what he doesn't understand? And what defines a woman? Biology, paperwork, or something more powerful? Choice, resilience, self-determination? What defines a family? Who decides what should be protected and what should be punished? Camille's life and her death left a town broken, but it also left it changed. And David Reynolds? He now serves a 30-year sentence at Baldwin Correctional. He maintains that he was protecting his son. But the truth is clearer now than ever. He wasn't protecting Jason. He was protecting the image of a world that no longer existed. One secret, one decision, one father who couldn't accept the truth, and a son who paid the price. David Reynolds thought he was saving his family. Instead, he destroyed it. Camille Hart lived her truth. She was honest. She loved without deception. But in the end, it wasn't her truth that got her killed. It was the silence around her, and the fear it provoked in a man who thought control was the same thing as love. Jason lost the woman he was ready to marry. He lost the father he once admired. And he lost the chance to live honestly, without fear of what might happen if he did. So now we ask you, what would you have done if you were in his shoes? Was this murder? Or something else? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We read every one. And if stories like this make you think, subscribe for more real-life crime twists that hit close to home. Because in our next video, a woman fakes her own death to escape her husband, only to return 15 years later. And what she finds waiting for her is worse than what she ran from. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. We'll see you next time.